Chapter 9. My eyes fluttered open softly, like butterflies showing off their wings, but the sight in front of me was not warming. I was currently laying on the ground in some dirty, grungy storage room, which would make Marie Kondo condemn the building instead of cleaning it. Mariah, Alison, and Santiago lay around me, still knocked out colder than frozen garlic bread. My pocket held my phone, and my firearm was tucked back safely into the holster on my backside. I was confused. It was like they wanted to give us an opportunity to plot our escape. I began to call Anthony, who was more likely to answer than 911, but a familiar voice warned otherwise. "There's no service. Trust me, I tried." Mrs. Findie sighed beside Mariah. She was propped up as if standing to attention. "Where are we?" "I don't know exactly." Mrs. Findie sounded disappointed in herself. "I think they have GPS blockers. Since they've tranquilized and captured us, I've been blind." Tranquilized us? I doubt Mrs. Findie took a dart to the neck. "All I know is that the ride from Mazzola's house took about 10 minutes. So I have a good idea how far we have gone, but Cleveland's huge. We could be in 10 different suburbs." I thought about the potential places we could be, but only a couple of them would allow a rundown building like this to clutter up their community. "This place is filthy," I muttered, "and Mazzola didn't live in the best part of town. I can only imagine the multitude of places we could be." I loved Cleveland, but there were definitely a few areas of town that could use a beautification project. But that assumed the stale Ohio government was capable of doing anything besides taking Ohio back to the 1880s. I paused, having picked up on a painful groaning sound. It wasn't coming from this room, but beneath it. I moved my ear over to a grate. My anxiety now worried I was going to contract some ancient disease buried in the creaking and falling apart woodwork. Ryan Mazzola had been the one groaning, and Jeremiah Redwood was now responding. Their voices were muffled, but clear to parse out. "Mazzola." Redwood said the name like he was kneading bread in his dream kitchen. "If you told me exactly what you said to those bounty hunter investigator wannabes, we could have ended your torture. This pain and punishment are practically self-inflicted. I wouldn't have to use this nail on you if you didn't lie to me." My imagination flooded my head with 10 different ways Redwood could be using that nail. None of them were pretty. "I told you!" Mazzola screamed. "I only told them who I was, and then you burst in." "I hate when people lie to me," Redwood muttered, "so I'm going to ask you one more time." "There's nothing to tell!" Mazzola's voice was so loud I was surprised that none of the neighbors had heard anything. "Maybe you need some persuasion." I could hear the giant smile on Redwood's face. He wasn't upset or bothered by torturing Ryan Mazzola. He was happy by it. I turned my face to see Mazzola tied up to a chair. There was a thud, and Mazzola let out a nasty howl. I didn't know where the nail had gone, but I could see Redwood holding a blood-covered nail. "How does that feel?" "Like hell!" Redwood's voice was getting stronger. "Then maybe you should tell me what I want to know." "I told you!" Mazzola shrieked before immediately stopping to gasp for air. "I told them about you. I told them your name, and they called the force and asked for your warrant." There was a pause in action, and in that pause, Santiago awoke. He immediately started awakening Mariah and Alison. "One more minute," Alison grumbled, which made me believe she had been awake this entire time. "If you don't wake up, I'll share pics I have of you without makeup," I threatened, which caused Alison to wake up like Frankenstein on the medical table. "All right, I'm up. Where are we?" "In a room," Mrs. Findie sassed. "Good work figuring that out." Mariah peered around, but there weren't any windows in here either. "But where?" "We don't know. Something is jamming our signals." I held my phone to Mariah's face as if seeing my phone was evidence. I couldn't even call 911, not that it mattered. If we were in the Cleveland city proper, I had a better time getting help from a vigilante neighborhood than an organized emergency response. Then again, was it the technology or the fact that my cell service provider exclusively set up shops and mall booths? "Shoot," Mariah looked at the door. "Have we tried the door?" Alison went over and pushed herself against the door, like a bull trying to dominate a matador. The door was the only door I had ever seen Alison lose against. Alison was impressed. "This house might be crap, but these doors are solid. That's a metal door right there." It dawned on me that Jeremiah Redwood hadn't been alone and had enlisted help to successfully kidnap us. Who shot darts at us? "There were others involved," Mrs. Findie apparently was good at finding the obvious. But I don't know who. Alison was now unimpressed. What do you know? I know that you're a slut. Mrs. Findie's robotic tone went into overdrive on that last word. You're all sluts if you ask me. A new person spoke out as they opened the impressively sturdy door. In their hands was the largest gun I had ever seen, something that appeared to be related to the missile launcher. I felt as if I recognized the woman in front of us, but was unable to connect the dots. Could that be? No, it couldn't. Part of me wondered if the dart's aftermath was tricking me, but the smile on the woman's face made me realize that my recognizing skills were not the problem here. You're probably so confused. Mrs. Elroy stressed so, like she was a valley girl. Although you're also dumb in the first place. Mrs. Elroy? I said her name out loud like she was a mystical being that had appeared in front of us. What the hell is going on? Ain't this old bitch dead? Alison cried out, a statement which would have been rude had Miss Elroy been a corpse, but now the four of us were looking between each other for confirmation that we were definitely seeing Mrs. Elroy alive and carrying a gun the size of Rhode Island. I thought you three would crack the case, Mrs. Elroy giggled, as if we had solved a fun puzzle. I mean, how often is it that you expect a twist like this? In every Law & Order episode, Mariah snarled. Really? I turned to Mariah. I prefer Law & Order SVU, much better chemistry. Oh, totally, voiced Alison. Santiago even jumped in. The original series is the best. Everyone shut the fuck up! Mrs. Elroy roared, and everyone turned to face her and her giant gun. Let me tell you what's going on. I'm working with Redwood. I'm actually his girlfriend. Girlfriend? Mrs. Findie asked. Redwood likes older ladies. Is there room in that relationship for one more? I didn't have the energy to have two manizers in this group. You're his girlfriend? Mariah looked upset. If Miss Elroy could get it, why couldn't we? Yes! Mrs. Elroy wailed dramatically with her gunless hand touching her forehead, as if she were thinking of Elvis and prepared to faint. That's why we've been dating for 3 months. But how... You're wondering how I'm alive since you thought I got shot up at my house, Mrs. Elroy sighed. Well, here's the obvious answer. It wasn't me that you found in my house. But we saw your body, Mariah answered, but Miss Elroy shook her gun, as if threatening us to re-remember the situation. You saw a body so blooded and gunned down it was probably really hard to tell it was actually me. You just assumed because an old lady got shot up in my house that it was me. So who was it? I followed up with an easy question. My pesky neighbor, Mrs. Jones. She was always too good for her bridges. I think you mean britches, I coolly stated for the record, wishing that Mrs. Doriander had been the pesky neighbor too good for her bridges instead of Mrs. Jones. You're really going to act like the grammar police when she's holding a small rocket? Mariah asked me with an offended expression on her face. I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Mrs. Elroy was eager to storytell, as if she was talking about a meet-cute tale and not a murder. I knew exactly where my son was hiding, and I wanted to lead you right to him. The original plan was to get you to my business and take care of you all in one fell swoop, but we had to readjust. Redwood had work, and then when we went to get Elroy without you, we found out he had left. Indeed, Larry Elroy had left his mother's little business store and was currently watching bad movies on Alison's couch, but I wasn't going to divulge that. So, Miss Elroy paced a little bit, surprisingly, considering she was more ancient than the Great Giza pyramids. We knew you were going to see Mazzola, so we decided that we'd grab all of you. We expected to run into Larry when we returned here, but he's missing. Returned here? I eyed the room and absorbed the surroundings. Dozens of dusty boxes, overpriced inventory which didn't look like it had moved in ages. I know exactly where we're at, I snarled. We're at your stupid craft store down the street from your house. Yes, crafty creatures. Mrs. Elroy spat the name out like it was an enemy of the people. A great place to store, torture, and kill. And no one is going to look here, Mariah gravely said to the room. Right-o! Mrs. Elroy laughed as if she was auditioning to be a villain on a soap opera. Why do you think I had Elroy stationed here? It was part of my plan with Redwood. If only we had acted sooner. Besides, nobody would ever think to look into this failed business. I was dead, and this place isn't even on my name. I had Redwood purchase it off me last month. Why are you against your son? Mariah cut to the chase. You're dating a man who is trying to kill your son, has killed your daughter-in-law and others. Why? Are you asking me why? Mrs. Elroy snorted, as if Mariah asked her why she liked money or enjoyed bread. Let me tell you why. I married a handsome man who was my high school lover. Tanner Elroy and I had 4 children. The youngest was Larry, and I never wanted or intended to give birth to him. All my other children were in high school, and I was turning 39. When Larry was born, I hated him because I had to take care of him. Instead of actually living my life and getting freedom, I had to listen to his demands. I had already spent 20 years of my damn life looking after children, and now I had to spend another 18 years looking after my unwanted child. How do you think I felt? By the time Larry left for college, I had turned 57. I couldn't go see the world. I had frequent pains and aches. I was so broken that Tanner left me, and it was all because of Larry. Larry was the reason I had turned old, so yes, I resent Larry. I resent what he did to me, how he made me like this. It felt like a rush of judgment to blame one's son for everything. I had never met someone who needed more therapy than Mrs. Elroy, and unfortunately she didn't seem like the type who would be receptive to hearing she needed therapy. Mrs. Elroy took a deep breath before her body shifted into a position of pleasure. And that's when everything changed. I met Jeremiah online. He was a nice man. We started dating right away. I couldn't believe he wanted to date me. He's so handsome. I don't know about that one. Mrs. Findie quietly bleeped out of her hardware, saying what we were all thinking. Jeremiah Redwood was the equivalent of regular vanilla ice cream in the grocery store. How long have you been dating Jeremiah Redwood? Mariah asked Mrs. Elroy. 3 months, although it feels like I've known him for years, Mrs. Elroy dreamily huffed. Last week, Jeremiah told me that he had discovered Larry's drug dealings. He told me that we had to stop Larry, so maybe I resented Larry. Maybe I hated my own child. But it became more than just dislike. We had to stop him from infecting our world with drugs. Oh, dear. It seemed like Jeremiah Redwood had left some important information out to his girlfriend. You'd kill your own kid for someone you met 3 months ago? Mariah asked. That's stupid. No! Mrs. Elroy looked disappointed that we didn't understand her wavelength. It's justified. Larry was selling drugs. But so was Jeremiah, I pointed out. He made money protecting the scheme. He only ratted Larry out to you because Quinn and Smiley wanted to cut Jeremiah out of it. No, I'm not going to listen to your lies. Mrs. Elroy's voice was stronger than the entire Cleveland Cavaliers team at one of those punching bag contests at the county fair. Redwood is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm with him till the end. Now everything made sense, or at least made sense to me. Redwood was a psychotic genius who had bedded Larry's mother just to limit Larry's sources. Upon smelling he was on the outs, he framed Larry. Maybe he was trying to kill Larry, but his plan changed. Quinn's suffered too, and Smiley was facing execution right now. So what do you plan to do with us? Mrs. Findie tossed out a question I had been wondering, but was also scared to know. Right now I want information, Mrs. Elroy burst out. Redwood asked me to talk to you. What do you want to know? I knew exactly what she wanted to know. Where the hell did you stash my son? Mrs. Elroy yelled. He was here. I know he was. Why should we tell you? Mrs. Findie growled. I mean, you'll probably kill us anyway. 10 points to Mrs. Findie for stating the obvious. There is a truth to what you say, but death can always be rescheduled. Mrs. Elroy yapped like a chihuahua with bloodlust. We can easily overpower you, Mariah casually brought up. She has a gun the size of Pluto, I side-whispered to Mariah. I don't know anything anyway, Alison said with primo acting skills. Mrs. Elroy looked as happy as a frog during mosquito season. This is cute, but you don't have to worry about me torturing you. Redwood brought some special guests to do that. Special guests? I questioned, like this was Saturday Night Live and hidden celebrities were about to pop out. But the door opened to reveal 2 women, Both were younger, probably in their late 20s or early 30s, and if Mrs. Elroy gave off a violent energy, these two women gave off pure, gory warfare. "Guests, that's a nice term for it," the one woman chuckled. She had brown hair that had been tied up into a bun with 2 chopsticks. A truly abominable look for a white woman. Part of her hair covered a quarter of the left side of her face before being tied back into the bun. She was serving some Japanese anime realness with eyes that pierced through you and beyond. Her jewelry was tacky, and her old-fashioned glasses looked more at home on Miss Elroy than on her face. "A little fancy for the type of work we do," the second joked back. Her hair flowed around her shoulders like a chocolate malt waterfall. She wore exotic floral clothing that hugged her large girls and barely covered her downtown region. She had a lei-type necklace around her neck and several piercings. Her eyes were soft and pulled on you to spill secrets. "My name is Claudia Perez," the cultural appropriated bun, chopsticks, dagger eyes shouted. "And I'm Haley Compton," muttered the wavy hair, soft secret spilling eyes one. Both girls were accompanied by cans of mace on their side and submarine guns casually held in their palms. What was the obsession with big guns? Was this a metaphor for Redwood's penis size? "These are your torture and interrogation specialists," Alison laughed. "They look like the only damage they could do is slap their boyfriend." Claudia ran across the room so quickly that the only moment I clearly saw was when Claudia arrived in front of Alison to smack her in the jaw. Alison turned from her attacker, and Claudia slowly walked back to her partner in crime and giggled, her hair and chopsticks still in one piece. "I wouldn't mess with us," Haley informed the room at large. "We have been known to be rather excessive in our violent approaches." "But our specialty is disguise," Claudia grinned. "Sometimes it's as simple as an outfit change. Like I might wear pants one day, then the next, I don't wear pants." "So she's a slut," Miss Findie whispered in her analog sass. "And I never have my hair styled like you," Haley eyed Mariah like she was leftover pasta. "It's too plain. We're all about looking fabulous while getting fabulous results for our clients. See, I've applied a deep tan. My skin is normally a little paler." "I'm purposely wearing tacky necklaces and bracelets." "These are fake freckles." "I don't need glasses." "I'm not wearing my preferred ear piercing." "My ears are pierced, but I don't have any earrings on." "There are too many piercings in my ears." "Okay!" Alison cut up the banter between Haley and Claudia. "We get it. You're unique." "Thank you." Haley appeared to either ignore or miss the sarcasm. "So, how shall we handle them, Marcia?" Claudia asked. "Wait, that's your name?" Santiago, who had been more silent than a mute orphan child in 1850s England, finally spoke with indignation. "Is there a problem with the name Marcia?" Mrs. Elroy eyed us intensely, and we all looked away to de-escalate the situation. She then turned back to the 2 new girls. "Have you found Larry? Where is he?" "We haven't found anything yet." Claudia's voice was thinner than a fast food brown bag. "My biggest priority isn't your son. It's these clowns here." Mariah let out an audible scoff. "Clowns? I resent that implication." I felt that the implication was accurate. "Ooh, she resents it," Haley and Claudia said at the same time, as if they were weird Stephen King psychic twins. "Tisk, tisk." Haley's slightly giggly expression evolved instantly to a pouty frown. "They've been bad." "Maybe they need a punishment," Claudia suggested. "That would be good." Haley's emotions were more out of control than the Ohio's gerrymandered districts. Hey, I snapped. "Why are you here? You girls look like college students who got caught up in crime. It's not too late to give it up." Claudia and Haley looked at each other like 2 dogs who weren't sure what to do with their silly human friend. "Oh, we know what we're doing," Claudia chuckled. "We want to be bad," Haley giggled. "Why?" Mariah jumped in. "Doesn't it feel good to be good?" "Let me tell you where you got me," Claudia began, her eyes boring miniature holes into Mariah. "I used to have a boyfriend who would use me for 3 things: my money, my house, and my body. So one day, I finally had enough, told him we were done and to get out of my house. Well, you know how men are. He beat me up like a red-headed stepchild, real bad." "Men are the worst," Alison sang like a choir member on the sideline. I gave her a stink eye. "Except for you. But you're gay." "What about me?" Santiago asked. "You're quiet, so I guess that makes you better than a bad guy." So rude, interrupting my story. Claudia moved forward and smacked Alison again. Alison looked shaken, as if humans normally dared not touch her. I was quite broken. Didn't call the cops, didn't go to the hospital. I picked up the phone and called Haley. She was my best friend, one of the only people to stay by my side when I was dating that trash can of a man. You know how it goes with friends. They say don't date bad guys, but then they're nowhere to be found when you do end up with a piece of shit. Been there, Alison cried out, seemingly enjoying the sermon. Haley tried comforting me. Claudia turned and beamed with a smile. Told me I could crash at her place. But that wasn't enough, so I cooked up an idea, and Haley, I knew I could trust her with the plan. We didn't mean to kill him, just ambush him and leave him feeling a bit fried, but when I realized that we had killed him, well, that was a rush of blood to the head. Which head? Alison's questions were weirdly acting as a comedic relief during a rather serious story. We cleaned up his body, and we put him in a cooler and buried it in a forest way out of town, Claudia summarized. As we finished him up, we realized that we loved the power that came with the action. There's no point in being good in a world that treats you poorly, so if people are going to treat me badly, I'll treat them badly in return. It sounds like the movie The Boy Who Committed Suicide with Love was loosely based on Claudia. We don't rely on stupid boys or dumbass girls anymore, Haley butted in. We rely on ourselves and each other. In a normal story, I might care or feel admirable about this story hour, but having it play out in front of you was morbid. What a good story, Mrs. Elroy slow-clapped like a douchey frat brother, once again holding out a word way too long for little dramatic effect. Now can you do your job and torture them? Claudia and Haley seemingly turned via levitation, but the girls eyed Mrs. Elroy with the individual energy of 4 hungry hippos. Are you ordering us? Claudia asked calmly, her aggressive tone melting away to reveal soft nuclear power. Yes, now get going, Marcia snarled. I was familiar with the aura that was pouring out of Claudia and Haley. I had felt it from Alison many times. It was the type of energy that could be summarized as, how dare you, or elongated through translation to mean, who the hell are you to say that, and now since you've said that, I'll have to do this. At the same time, Claudia and Haley both pointed their submarine guns at Mrs. Elroy. Mrs. Elroy, who had been holding her own giant gun, pointed it at Claudia. It was a standstill. If Mrs. Elroy really had been on her A-game, she would have fired instantly. What the hell are you two girls doing? Marcia Elroy was sweating like a cow in the sun. What does it look like we're doing? Claudia spat. Her sugary tolerance had turned into vile apple vinegar. You're no longer of need, Marcia, Haley whispered. What is that supposed to mean? Marcia roared. She turned between both of them with a cocaine energy. You've been marked as a loose strand, Claudia smiled. At this point, we have access to the store. There's not much skills you provide. We just wanted to keep you in check, and what's a better check than death? Hey, excuse me? Marcia Elroy was so taken aback that if we could measure how taken aback she was, it would probably be a few Olympic-sized leagues at a minimum. You'll be soon excused, Haley jumped in. Her sweet words made the vitriol hit a new level of fuckery. Redwood didn't love you. You were part of Redwood's plan to get to Larry. He knew about Larry's whereabouts, got access to his schedule, turned his mother against her son. It's a sociopath's dream. Oh, and this shop makes a great storage facility and murder room. Thanks, Loose Strand. How dare you! Mrs. Elroy appeared ready to shoot her gun, but Haley threw her gun at Mrs. Elroy. In a moment of scared uncertainty and clumsiness, Miss Elroy dropped her own gun to the floor with a clatter. Claudia and Haley went into action like two spiders with prey. Claudia sat on top of Mrs. Elroy, crushing the old woman before she could grab her gun. Haley brought out a roll of duct tape from her back pocket and taped Mrs. Elroy's mouth before duct taping her arms and legs together. We'll make sure you feel torture and pain before you die, Haley grinned. We don't want to give you preferential treatment. Redwood didn't clarify he wanted you gone slowly. A quick wave of realization hit me like reality on a narcissist. You were the ones who killed Jeffrey Quinns, I yelled, and who killed the neighbor, and Larry's wife, sister, and just everyone. Claudia and Haley gave each other a soft smile. Great guess, but wrong, Claudia answered while keeping Mrs. Elroy still beneath her. All of that was Redwood. He wanted us to help him since we're very good at torture and interrogation. We taught him all he had to know when it comes to the art of torture, interrogation, even murder. Redwood's a bad man, but he pays well. The only difference is there's no interrogation with Marcia, Haley corrected, as if we had used the wrong pronoun to refer to them. We're going to torture and then kill her. Holy shit, Mariah whispered, looking at me. Is Cleveland notorious for having these many psychotic killing machines? I haven't done the research, so I didn't feel confident giving an answer. Marcia Elroy was trying to get out of her duct tape, but to no avail. I felt sorry for her. She definitely had some demons and was probably murderous adjacent, but it appears that Redwood had brought out the worst from Marcia, and while he had brought out the worst, Redwood had been the worst thing for Mrs. Elroy. And now Mrs. Elroy would die, all because she loved Redwood and hated her son. There was nothing we could have done to save her unless we wanted to be killed by these two witches. Knowing Alison, I knew she wouldn't care if Marcia died. I didn't think Santiago carried emotion, but Mariah, Mrs. Findie, and I would probably feel a little clammy watching Mrs. Elroy pass right in front of us. Wait, Mrs. Findie was a robot who technically didn't have eyes. With Mrs. Elroy taped shut into the floor, both girls got up. Claudia pulled out a small purse that had been hooked to her pants. Most women walk around with makeup, snacks, credit cards, tampons, or something that was above my pay grade of knowledge as a purseless man. But Claudia's purse was filled with small and sharp weapons. From my limited position, I saw needles, scissors, files, letter openers, small knives. I wouldn't invite these two for coffee at a public cafe. They might scalp me. What weapon of choice should we use? Claudia asked Haley, as if they were picking snow cone flavors and not violent ways to kill an old woman. Oh, I was thinking of an ice pick. Haley picked up one from the bag. I want to go first. Fine, Claudia sighed. The whole event sounded like two kindergartners fighting over who gets to play chef at the pretend kitchen set. Haley picked up the ice pick and slowly pressed down on Mrs. Elroy's arm. Miss Elroy began to make a shriek as the hole expanded. Marcia screamed and shouted out something hidden behind the duct tape. Instead of anything coherent, it sounded like she was enjoying gooey saltwater taffy in a tight tubular space. I don't know how long it went on. I lost track of time as the small holes bled out across Mrs. Elroy's arms, thighs, hands, legs, shoulder, chest, and face, her body dotted with injuries, blood slowly oozing down her body and creating small pools on the floor. I'm done. Claudia exhaled as if she had finished installing a furnace. Me too, agreed Haley. This time it looked like they were kids who got bored of an activity and wanted to play another. Marcia was still alive, but she appeared to be on the cusp of death. Haley and Claudia both took their guns from their holster, aimed quickly, and shot Marcia in the head 2 times each. Blood and body matter sprayed the right side of the room. Thankfully, Mariah, Alison, Santiago, Mrs. Findie, and I had been spared from the goop. Haley smiled like she had been eating chocolate. I think she's dead now. That went down well. Claudia licked some of the blood off the ice pick like it was a horror movie. I felt my whole body go cold. We were dealing with some grade A freaky murderers. So, Claudia put the ice pick back in her purse of goodies and turned to face us. I don't know how anyone looked, but I can assure you that my eyes were wider than a 4-year-old on Christmas. I want some fucking information, and I want it fast. If not, then there might be 5 more bodies looking like that pile of shit. Damn! Alison squealed. You two are nasty! I feel like I've been sexually assaulted at my favorite restaurant, Mrs. Findie mumbled. No worries, I'll smash you gigabyte by gigabyte, Haley snarled. Gigabytes are data related, Mrs. Findie roared. You'd smash my hardware and chips. You get the point, Rosie, Claudia smiled. I think I was the only person besides Claudia to get the Jetsons reference, and in this hellhole of death and torture, I appreciated a bit of pop culture.